Hey, Game Design Ed here with a pre-release version of National Geographic Puzzle Explorer. Today I want to show you how to trick the player. There are many ways to trick a player, but I want to show you a way to trick the player that preys on the player's efficiency. That is, I'll show you a way to make a puzzle that involves sequencing, but I want to trick the player into trying to do the steps of the puzzle out of order, because a later step seems easier to do right now. Let's travel to Antarctica. Here we are in the frozen Antarctic tundra. Let's start by placing some glacial walls to block the player's path to the compass, which the player needs to reach in order to complete the puzzle. Now let's make it a little more interesting and remove some of these blocks and replace them with snowballs. The snowballs are pushable objects, that is, the player can push these snowballs. Even more interestingly, the player can push these snowballs into the water and make a snow bridge. So let's add some water, and let's make the water 2 blocks across and all the way down the game board. And let's test it. See how the player can push the snowballs into the water to make a snow bridge? Pretty cool. But we don't have enough snowballs to make a complete snow bridge across to the other side of the water. So let's go back into build mode. Let's take out this glacial wall and add an ice block. Like a snowball, an ice block is a pushable object. However, while a snowball only moves one space when pushed, an ice block continues to move until it's stopped by something. Or better, an ice block in motion remains in motion until it is acted on by an outside force. Like a snowball, an ice block can be pushed into the water to create a bridge. However, it makes an ice bridge. If the player steps onto the ice bridge, they will slide until they're acted on by an outside force. That is, until something such as this snow or a glacial wall or water stop them. Hopefully it isn't water that stops them, because when the player touches water, the level resets. The water is just too cold. So we made it to the compass. Let's add some cameras. Cameras are collectibles. They're objects that the player needs to collect in order to reach the compass. Let's bring these snow bridges into the equation as the path to reach this camera. Let's remove some water here and remove this snowball. Move water here. Let's do the other side. And let's add a snowball to that side. Let's test that out. Now we can cross the water at the top by building that bridge, and we can come back over. But we have cut the bottom bridge out of the equation. We'll bring that back into play shortly. Currently, the player can avoid the bridges at the top of the board as well. So let's add in some water on this path so the player cannot avoid the bridges at the top of the game board. And then let's add some water here so the player also has to use the bridges at the bottom of the game board. Let's test out our puzzle. We can cross over and get the camera, and then cross back over and push out the bridge at the bottom of the board. There! Now the player has to use the top bridges to get the camera and the bottom bridges to get the compass. But we haven't tricked the player yet. Let's add in a camera here. This collectible is going to be the bait for our trap. Let's add another camera here. This can be the bait for our second trap. If we don't get them with the first one, maybe we can get them with this second one. Let's add in more water and a snowball for a bridge to get across the water. Let's test it. Wait, let's add some water here so the player thinks they pushed the snowball into there. Then they'll be stuck. It's a small trick, but it just might work. Let's test that. The puzzle can still be completed. Okay, let's set some traps. Let's move the first camera down here farther away from where the player starts. And let's move this third camera right next to it. This may be enough to trick the player into attempting to complete the puzzle in the wrong order or out of sequence. Let's add some water up here and another snowball. This might trick the player into pushing the wrong snowball at the wrong time. If they push the bottom snowball directly ahead of them into the water, then they won't be able to complete the puzzle. Let's add some ice here. Ice makes the player slide until they're acted on by an outside force. Oops, let's take that water back out because the puzzle can't be completed with it there. Okay, let's test our puzzle again. And it can be completed. Okay, let's add some thin ice. Thin ice is like ice, it's slippery and the player slides on it. However, thin ice breaks once you slide over it, so you can't slide back. So we've added some thin ice between camera 1 and camera 3, and we've added some right before camera 2. So let's test it. Here the player may let their efficiency get the best of them. Instead of seeing that the first camera they're supposed to get is the farthest one away, they decide to go for the one that is closest to them. Maybe they don't want to have to come back, or they just think that this one is the first one they need to get since it's right here, so the ice breaks, but they play on. They get the third camera and then slide across that ice to the first camera, and that ice breaks. Now the player is stuck. We've tricked them. Or if they aren't tricked into getting camera 2 first and go for camera 1, but then decide to cross the thin ice to get camera 3, they are then stuck as well. And we've tricked them again. Let's reset the puzzle. If they get the cameras in the proper order and don't cross any thin ice, they can complete the puzzle. So that's a puzzle with a few traps, a puzzle with a few ways that could trick the player. Pushing the wrong snowballs or getting the collectibles in the wrong, though seemingly more efficient order.